Hello. I want to welcome our graduates and say also warm welcome to their families, everyone who's here, and also warm welcome to my colleagues who are joining me on the stage today. They're all English department professors. I'm Charlotte Sussman. I'm the chair of the English department, and it's such a pleasure to see you all here, live and in person. I don't think the satisfaction of that, or really the thrill of that, is going to wear off for me anytime soon. So my own son is graduating from high school in a few weeks. So I think I might be able to guess what the parents and other other family members here today might be feeling. A little whiplash at the speed with which a tiny, independent creature, mostly interested in my son's case in stomping in mud puddles and identifying different kinds of trucks, has become not just independent, but also deeply reflective about themselves and about the world. Reflections they probably share with you whether you want to hear them or not. You might feel a little worried about what they'll do next in the admittedly scary world we're living in. But mostly, I think you're just caught up in the pleasure of getting to know the thoughtful, creative, funny, responsible adult that your child has become. And maybe you're trying not to cry. I know that I will be. The pleasure of getting to know your children is something that we're grateful to have shared for the past 4 years. It's an open secret about teaching that we learn as much from our students as they learn from us. You can see from the graduation booklet the range of subjects they've done original research on and the impressive variety of creative writing projects that they've undertaken. And that list only scratches the surface of the papers they've written on Shakespeare and on Zora Neale Hurston, on literature's relationship to the environment and its relationship to existentialist philosophy. I myself teach literature that was written a very long time ago, in the 18th and 19th centuries. But I can say without irony that it comes alive in surprising ways every time that I teach it. The alchemy of literature and the prismatic quality of reading have made Robinson Crusoe's or Elizabeth Bennet's choices seem very different now than they did when I started teaching long ago in the previous century. When I'm able to see them now, see those characters now through the new eyes of this new set of students and of graduates. And this graduating class, of course, has had to deal with far more than learning about iambic pentameter or Joyce's epiphanies. They've had to navigate a global pandemic and its consequences during what would have been the heart of their college experience. In so many ways, it is not what we would have wanted for them. But I know I speak for my colleagues when I express our respect and our admiration for the ways in which they've persevered and even prospered in the face of this adversity. From you, graduates, we've not only learned new ways to read poems or write essays, but also lessons in resilience, patience, and ingenuity. It has seemed to me that you've turned to literature with perhaps a deeper hunger for answers than previous generations, and a salutary directness about the relationship between your own lives and the lives that you read about. I've been thinking all year about words I read in October from Sarah Geyer, who's the Dean of Humanities at Berkeley, about the renewed importance of humanities in such a time. So many of us, she says, in our own ways, found ourselves in a series of unprecedented situations without a compass or guide. It is not at all surprising that students are turning to the arts and humanities as a way to make sense of our current moment. The imaginative, ethical, creative, and analytical contributions and historical observations of humanities research and artistic production provide a valuable way to understand the complexities brought on by contemporary challenges. A student quoted in the same article describes changing his major from political science to philosophy because this is what the student says, asks more fundamental questions that seem to transcend global topics such as politics in terms of their everyday experience. English, I hope, has likewise allowed you to explore fundamental questions that go beyond the topical, but also engage with the everyday. And I hope that as you journey out into the world, literature continues to be a solace and a medium and an analytical tool that will help you wrestle with those fundamental questions. Transitions can be joyous, but they can also be hard. And I think often of Adam's words in Milton's epic poem about the book of Genesis, Paradise Lost, when he learns that he and Eve will be expelled from paradise. Dreading to leave what he does actually call their happy place, he worries that all places else will inhospitable appear and desolate, not knowing us nor known. Now, I'm by no means saying that Duke is or has ever been an Eden, but I do know that worry about leaving a place that is not only familiar to you, but where you also feel known by the people and scenes around you. And we have indeed been glad to know you. But this transition is no expulsion. Our relationships will not end with graduation. We look forward to hearing about all that you encounter as you take your next steps in the world, and you are always welcome to come back and tell us about them, and we will always be glad to celebrate them with you. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to our student speaker, Avery Didden, and then to members of the faculty who will present some of our student prizes. Thank you.
When I was 3 years old, I memorized the entirety of the book Angelina Ballerina from cover to cover. Not only was the book committed to memory verbatim, but my memorization was timed so that I knew which words corresponded with each page. I would sit in the ground in my living room and practice what I called reading the book, reciting the story page by page for anyone who wanted to listen. I'm sorry to say that despite what I might have claimed 19 years ago, I could not actually read at that point in my life. However, what I can claim is that ever since I was little, I have always been in awe of stories. And for me, they have taken on 3 forms over the course of my life. First, stories were magic. As I grew up and actually learned how to read, it was almost as if I entered a different world. I left my surroundings behind and was somewhere else for a bit. If you've ever seen the TV show Gilmore Girls, you might be familiar with how in her graduation speech, the main character Rory says she, quote, hunted the white whale aboard the Pequod and, quote, rode a sad train with Anna Karenina. In a similar way, I lived at Hogwarts with Harry, Ron, and Hermione and went on a quest to find the Sorcerer's Stone. I put on a costume and produced a play with Meg, Jo, Amy, Beth, and Laurie. I received memories with Jonas on a journey to become the giver. And as I flipped page by page, I entered the stories of these fictional characters, all of which, for a few hours, felt more real to me than the chair on which I was sitting. I got to go on so many adventures, see so many places, and live so many lives that were not my own. To a younger me, and honestly still to this day, there was nothing more exciting than getting to escape into a world of my own imagining. It was, and in some senses still is, the purest form of magic. In high school, I started to fancy myself an English scholar. I read Fyodor Dostoevsky, was captivated by Jane Austen, and devoured Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And this is when, for me, stories took on their second form. Stories were truths. By reading books and analyzing them, I could discover larger principles about the world and about society. I could understand why people and places operate in certain ways when reasoning previously confounded me. In this way, books taught me lessons, or truths, about the complex nature of humanity. Fitzgerald taught me that time is irretrievable. Salinger taught me that innocence is fleeting and precious. And Hemingway taught me about the futility of war, and I was a very eager student. In all honesty, when I applied to Duke 4 years ago as an English major, I thought I knew all there was to know about stories. I had analyzed hundreds of them. I knew how to read them, to close read them, to talk about their style and structure. But shortly, very shortly, I realized how much more I had to learn. Throughout my time as an English major here, stories have taken on their third form in my life. As much as I still believe stories are magic and truth, I also know this: stories are mirrors. It's a wonderful thing to escape with reading, for it to be magic, It's equally amazing when that escape teaches you a truth about how society functions. However, the most incredible thing a story can do is tell you something about yourself, to see yourself in a new way. It is reading a line in a Shakespeare sonnet to meet your Area 1 requirement while you struggle with what to do with your life that you also find yourself asking, quote, when do I count the clock that tells the time? It is seeing a headstrong Jane Eyre stand up for herself that makes you wish you were a little braver. It is watching Gwendolyn hold back sobs in Daniel Deronda that makes you realize that you too rely on others for your morals. When stories show us these things, they are still magic, they are still truths, but on a different scale. One that is infinitely smaller than teleporting to a new place or discovering a truth about the world, but amazingly, it's just as important. This is how stories are mirrors. They force us to stare into a reflection, and through characters and plot, discover facets of ourselves that have gone unexamined or maybe completely unnoticed before. This, to me, has been the most meaningful form stories have taken on, because while I love a good adventure and believe it is important to understand societal truths, stories are genuinely valuable when we know how we, as individuals, fit into the grand scheme. I, like most of you I'm sure, hate to feel out of control. So how worthwhile an experience to see your reflection in stories, to see the attributes and faults of the only thing you have control over, yourself. And crucially, once stories bring pieces of ourselves to our attention, once we see ourselves in the mirror, we can finally address what needs to be changed, cultivated, and developed. It's the best gift we, for lack of better wording, control freaks, can be given. Unlike the confidence I had when exiting high school, I leave Duke today fully certain I do not know even a fraction of what is important about stories. I also know that these three forms stories have taken on in my life will not be the only ones, that there will be many more evolutions to come. My hope is, just as these three forms of stories, magic, truth, and mirrors, have brought me closer to understanding what is important about my place in the world, that the next form stories take on will continue to guide me along my personal journey. English Department Class of 2023, I hope in these last 4 years you have had your own journey with stories. I hope they have taken you to faraway places, and I hope they are now places close to your heart. I hope they have taught you things about the world and about relationships and about people. Most crucially, I hope they have held up a mirror and shown you something about yourself, positive or negative. I hope you have had the courage to act on it, and if not, there's always tomorrow. Going forward, I hope stories continue to take on many different forms when you need them to most, and I hope each one helps you to better understand yourself, your life, and your goals. And so if I have any advice to impart, it's this. If ever you feel lost, unsure, or confused in these coming months, I think it's always best to pick up a book and see what you find in the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Avery. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jarvis McGinnis, an assistant professor here in the English department, and I have the honor of presenting the award for the most original honors thesis. I had the privilege of advising KB Dennis's honors thesis, Bastards and Butterflies, theorizing the hip-hop epic during the woke era, and could not be more pleased with the outcome. KB wrote an ambitious and exciting thesis. It is a finely written and well-researched work of literary, music, and popular culture criticism that seamlessly blends the three genres. Bastards and Butterflies argues that Kendrick Lamar, a popular rapper and hip-hop artist, and Reginald Dwayne Betts, a contemporary poet whose style is inspired by hip-hop, turn to the Homeric epic to respond to the social, cultural, and political upheavals of what KB designates as the woke era, the period between 2014 and 2017 that saw the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement in response to repeated state-sanctioned police violence against African Americans. KB compares Lamar's multi-Grammy award-winning album, To Pimp a Butterfly, to Betts' critically acclaimed poetry collection, Bastards of the Reagan Era, both of which were released in 2015. In doing so, he coins a new subgenre at the intersection of hip-hop and epic poetry, what he terms the hip-hop epic. KB writes, and I quote, "The epic, with its sprawling length and focus on grand journeys and the passage of time, was the best poetic form for Lamar and Betts to use to frame their personal odysseys and the larger odyssey of Black people throughout world history." KB's analyses of contemporary hip-hop and poetry move across both genres so skillfully that it obscures the difficulty of comparative analyses, especially across distinct artistic modalities such as music and literature. Even when working within the same mode, comparative analyses can be challenging for students as it is easy to give one case study more attention than the other. However, KB is balanced in his attention to Lamar's album and Betts' poetry, which he uses to make an important intervention in recent cultural debates about the ongoing significance, or lack thereof, of poetry in contemporary American culture. Given that rap and hip-hop are now the most consumed musical genres, KB convincingly surmises the following. These hip-hop poems are garnering billions of audio streams, hundreds of millions of video views, and being performed for hundreds of thousands of fans around the world. Betts and Lamar are reinvigorating a genre, poetry, that is constantly being pronounced dead with an unflinching focus on Black death. Thus, the hip-hop epics of To Pimp a Butterfly and Bastards of the Reagan Era use the current commerciality of hip-hop to recenter the culture's poetic foundation and socially conscious roots in front of an audience that may never encounter canonical poets such as Walt Whitman or Robert Frost. As you can hear from this brief passage, KB is possessed of a fine critical ear, attuned to the nuances of both hip-hop and poetry, and his thesis teaches readers how to critically listen to and read across both genres. His writing is clear yet stylistic, reflecting the rhythms of hip-hop and poetry, and his analyses are sharp, nuanced, and persuasive. I especially appreciate how his conception of the hip-hop era, of the hip-hop epic, moves across time and space, situating Lamar and Betts as the inheritors of the Homeric epic, but also demonstrating how they deformed that same tradition and pushed the limits to capture the distinctiveness of Black people, histories, and cultures. Finally, KB was just an absolute pleasure to work with. He is an original and supple thinker who is also highly teachable and welcomes constructive criticism. He is hardworking, thoughtful, and takes the research process and craft of writing seriously. He will no doubt excel in his career as a music journalist and in his new role as a staff writer for Billboard. My heartiest congratulations to KB and to his family and friends for this well-deserved honor. Thank you.
Okay, it's me again. This time I have the great pleasure of presenting the Stanley E. Fish Award for Outstanding Work in British Literature to Annika Zegers for a paper she actually wrote for my Jane Austen class this spring. This paper is representative of the outstanding work that she did for this course and in all of her work as an English major. So Annika is just the most fantastic student to have in a class, not just in the usual ways, always being prepared, always having really insightful things to say, but also in more unusual ways. Her real generosity in listening not only to her professor, but also to her classmates, And also the way that she's able to see both the really serious and the really fun aspects of any work and any course of knowledge. She's also a wonderful writer. Her writing is characterized by clarity, rigor, and the ability to show you why the topic she's writing about matters. Her prize-winning essay analyzes the minor character of Mr. Palmer from Jane Austen's novel Sense and Sensibility, a character memorably played by Hugh Laurie in the film, if you've seen that. And the paper astutely traces his evolution from a caricature to a character, from somebody who's flat, only used for comic effect, to a real, something more like a real person with an imagined inner life and feelings. A writer who is always able to see the forest as well as the trees, Annika argues that even as the protagonists in the novel learn that people other than themselves might have feelings that need to be respected, we, as readers, learn a similar thing. And I'm going to read to you from part of the conclusion to this paper, which says this very eloquently. Annika says, because there are characters with depth and personality beyond the protagonists, the centrality of the narrative perspective destabilizes. After all, while Austen chose to tell the story through the person and voice presented in the final novel, Mr. Palmer's inner life proves that there are other perspectives she could have prioritized. This instability does not hinder her novel, however, but expands its artistic vision. It proves that there is a social world within Sense and Sensibility far vaster than a single novel could ever contain. When the minor characters have as much inner life as the major ones, the social world of the novel overflows with possibility. It feels, in a sense, alive and prone to growth. The verisimilitude of Austen's world building is in no large part indebted to the vitality of her supporting characters who, like Mr. Palmer, bear emotional and social consequence in the midst of the protagonist's story. So I think you can see from that what a kind of masterful writer she is to be able to summarize that and to get you right to the heart of the matter and tell you why it's important. So Annika, it's been a joy and a privilege to work with you this semester, and Annika is going on to do a master's degree at Oxford University in English literature, and we wish you all the best in that next endeavor.
Howdy, y'all. Can you hear me? Okay. Congratulations to Annika, to KB, and away we go with a co-winner of the Louis J. Budd Award in American Literature, Alison Rothberg. In her senior thesis, Undoing Disneyland, Alison Rothberg pursues the Disneyfication of the United States in 3 recent novels. E.L. Doctorow's The Book of Daniel from '71, using recently loosely, which is a fictionalization of the Rosenberg trial. Don DeLillo's White Noise from 1985, which you all know from the current movie version. And Gary Stengart's super sad true love story from 2010. A speculative narrative that takes place after the fall of the American Empire. By Disneyfication, Ali means the culture of whitewashed storytelling, plastic substitution, and the fetishization of cute that grounds the myth of America in historical amnesia, and that Doctorow's Daniel recognizes at work, or rather at play, in the original Anaheim, California amusement park. Ali's analytic insight is to leverage Doctorow's concentrated analysis of Disneyland to unpack what she reveals as an enlarging arc of U.S. techno-media consumerism, she has some big words, at work in the other novels. Her critical distance comes from countering the bad habit of American forgetting and self-delusion. Fake news, anyone? reconstituting memory and renewing our commitment to the greater human good. For Allie, the wellspring of such renewal is what she calls, from the hint in Doctorow's title and with the help of Barry Campbell, cynical hope, a Judaic ethos turned universalist essay. Now, this is just not a random prize for reasons that require a short, really, I promise, very short, history lesson. Over many years, Duke has become a great place overall for those of Jewish extraction, as my Italian grandmother liked to say, to study and to teach. Indeed, when the Ivies were policing their quotas, Duke was opening the doors to faculty and students who were also, of course, and necessarily, twice as good as many of their Gentile competitors. But at the height of McCarthyism in the mid-1950s, which was the very moment of the Rosenberg trials restaged in Allie's reference text, Doctorow's The Book of Daniel, anti-Semitism raised its dangerous head even here at Duke, threatening the mental well-being, if not more, of faculty and students alike. And do you know who among the few stepped up and spoke up and risked his career to squelch the ugliness? The Academy's leading scholar of Mark Twain, who happened also to be the child of Polish and Lithuanian immigrants, Catholics, mind you, by the name of Louis J. Budd, born Budrowitz, whose wife name was tellingly Isabel Amelia Marx. Allie's thesis, unbeknownst to itself, of course, continues directly in the critical engagement with American culture of Mark Twain, the struggle for Jewish inclusion of Louis J. Budd, and the universal reach of the Judaic formulation of justified suffering, which Daniel Isaacson recalls from his maternal grandmother in words that are, I asked for, well, it's only PG, to make love to the world not gently. Which is to say, I can't imagine a more appropriate recipient of the Louis J. Budd Prize in American Literature than Alison Rothberg. Well, short of Ian Villanueva, that is. All right. So, off we go.
Hello, happy Mother's Day. You did a great job. I'm Priscilla Walt. I teach also American literature. And I am presenting an award to someone I think isn't here. Anna is not here. Oh, you are. Yay. Sorry, I couldn't see you. Yay. Okay, good. I wish that instead of listening to my presentation of Louis J. Budd Award for outstanding work in American literature, you could have heard Anna's presentation of her outstanding work at our Distinction Day. Her wonderful intelligence and clarity of thought were mesmerizing, but best of all was her sheer delight in the literature and in the critical project more broadly, which was infectious even through the recording that I had to resort to. It was nothing short of sublime. When Iana Villanueva asked me to advise a senior thesis on Black women's speculative fiction, I was delighted, even more so when she told me she was motivated in part by her conviction that a deep dive into the literature would help her think through some of the ethical issues, especially unconscious biases, she believed she would encounter in her future work in the medical profession. I couldn't agree more. I had never met Ayanna, but I immediately recognized a kindred spirit and enthusiastically agreed to advise the project, an excellent decision. In Reimagining Reality, the intersection of Black science fiction, structural violence, and trauma on the body and environment, Ayanna journeys boldly into the magnificently disorienting imaginations of N.K. Jemisin, the Broken Earth trilogy, Nnedi Okorafor,
The Book of Phoenix and Who Fears Death, and Octavia Butler, the Xenogenesis trilogy, all summer reading, by the way. Write those down. Great. There she finds Orogenes, evolved humans with the power to manipulate kinetic energy to negate or create seismic disturbances. An accelerated woman, powerful enough to change the course of humanity's future. And the Oankali, extraterrestrial deep ecologists who can cure cancer, which they consider a gift for the insight it gives them into cell manipulation. And there she finds deep analyses of how we 21st century humans value and don't value life, and what we can and should change about our thinking. From the quality of her insights and her enviable calm and centeredness, even when it seemed there weren't enough hours in the day for all the work she wanted to do, I saw clearly what kind of doctor Ayana is going to be. I loved watching her delight in the literature and later in the thinking and writing that goes into a year-long writing project. These essays are difficult to write, but Ayana always seemed to be having a great time, even in the hectic final days when we always wish we had just one more week. And I loved watching her grapple with new insights and new concepts, especially as she began to realize the mirror science fiction holds to our lives. How, with a particular intensity, science fiction catches us in the act of making history, both in the sense of laying the groundwork for the character's future and in the sense of writing our own stories about the past. And how, as they show us the words, the images, and the stories through which we constitute our worlds, they offer the tools through which we might change them. And I fully expect future Dr. Ayana Villanueva to be fully involved in making some of those changes. Please join me in congratulating Ayana.
I suppose I was supposed to tell you I'm Professor Tom Ferrara. Wardrobe malfunction. This go around, it's a prize in literary theory named after another former colleague of mine, Barbara Herrnstein-Smith, who was a tour de force in and of herself. For Aksaj Turabayli. I have known Aksaj since his earliest days at Duke, when he landed in the Intro to English seminar I was teaching. In class, he was like a good egg, as were so many of you folks are majors. And let me underscore the comments on Annika. He did his homework, contributed to conversation in an articulate way, and was a receptive listener as well. As I say, like so many of our students, replete with imagination, personal, yet hungry for more, literary. But where Aksaj was, well, Aksaj was in my office, just next to the classroom, for he was there practically all the time. Questions galore, curiosity unbounded, with a turn of mind at once philosophical, the way my mother means the word, big ideas at work, with and against each other, and historical. How is the canon of Anglophone literature formed? What excuse is that? I was not alone, evidently, in the office visits, it turned out. He engaged all the faculty in this way, and not just in English, answering questions as eclectic as our answers, and writing it all down, especially references to writers and texts. Now, what does this have to do with the Barbara Herrnstein-Smith Prize in Literary Theory, which goes this year to Aksaj in large measure for his senior thesis, The Great Blue American Novel? You see, the principal lesson of Barbara Smith's literary theory was that theoreticians worry too much about the chicken and egg of discourse. So just do it, as the Nike ads then said. Believe you me, Oxash has, with a vengeance, theoretically and historically and aesthetically. A couple of years go by, and Oxash is still crashing our offices, COVID receding, even when not enrolled in our classes. Indeed, Oxash has been wondering especially, what are the blues, really? And why do writers of African American experience, critics now, but also critics and authors then, musicians then, and musicians now, incessantly credit this particular music form new to a post-millennial musician with being so literarily informative, as much a conjuring spirit as a communal entertainment? Tilly went researching. In the libraries, he found superb older books on blues phenomenon by Ralph Waldo Ellison, Amira Baraka, and Albert Murray. He took a course on African American literature with Professor McGinnis. He got tutored in musical theory by Professor Nicholas Stoya and pop music stylizations by Professor Taylor Black. Then he wrote Into the Mystery, a first chapter on the mystical force of music in novels by Faulkner, Toomer, McKay, and Hurston. Could have been a thesis unto itself, but he kept going. The second chapter focuses extensively on the aesthetic power of blues repetition, where he leverages both Western Marxist theory and ethno-music theory, before returning for quick riffs on the novels themselves. That is senior thesis number 2. And then a third chapter on the humor of it all, in a piercing yet appreciative comprehension of the role of African American comedy, especially self-irony, and this includes irony directed to the extravagant literary critic, has played in the blues and the blues novel tradition, in the spirit, no coincidence, of Professor Doug Jones's cutting-edge research on Black theatricality. 3 distinctions in 1. I am tempted to conclude like a book reviewer, saying his senior thesis would be a tour de force of music, literature, and ritual. If it weren't, well, so bad. But it's not just Akshaw's thesis that suffers a bit from bloat. I mean, you too, Abby. Why can't you all get your entire draft done in time enough to sit on them? It would sure save the lot of us a lot of extra reading.
I'm Arthi Vade, and I'm the Director of Undergraduate Studies, and it is my role to announce the graduates. So first up, Nicholas Bryce Fair.
Yeah, Nicholas!
Piper Camille Boykin. Sophia Elizabeth Satina. Noam Cherky. Nikki Krista Daniels.
Go, Nikki.
Kyle Brandon KB Dennis. Avery Marie Didden. Michelle Garbett. Dylan Charles Haston. Nina Jang. Christopher Dylan Kuo. Lily Eliana Levin. Brandy Nicole Martin. Mia Marie Miranda. Jake Christopher Piazza. Caroline Michelle Petro Cohen. Erica Racinos. Allison Rachel Rothberg. Brandon Chase Scarberry. Rebecca Paige Schneen. Sasha Betty Seinfeld. Kayla O. Smith. Caitlin Wanwan Su. Caitlin Amy Tsai. Aksaj Raghu Tribalu. Ayana Villanueva.
Congratulations to everyone. We're so proud of you. I'm going to send you on your way with one more literary quote. The words of one of the most intrepid heroes or heroines of all literature, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, who said, "I remembered that the real world was wide, and that a varied field of hopes and fears, of sensations and excitements, awaited those who had the courage to go forth into its expanse to seek real knowledge of life amidst its perils." So bon voyage, stay in touch, happy Mother's Day, and enjoy the afternoon. Thank you, everyone.